Ever feel like you're just going through the motions with English vocabulary? Like you're studying, but it's not really sticking.
You're definitely not alone.
Yeah.
It's easy to fall into those common traps when you're learning a new language.
Right. So today we're doing a deep dive into 5 of those common mistakes we make when trying to learn English words, and more importantly, how to fix them.
And we're going to talk about how to make those words stick for good. It's about building fluency and really understanding how the language works, not just memorizing a bunch of random words.
Exactly. It's not about cramming. It's about making the language click.
Yeah.
So let's jump right into that first mistake, which is something I think we're all guilty of. Memorizing long lists of words without any context.
Oh, yeah.
It seems like such a common starting point, like here's your vocabulary list for the week, but why doesn't that really work?
Think of it this way. Imagine trying to remember a phone number, right? But you don't associate it with a person or a place or anything.
It's just a jumble of numbers.
Exactly. It just kind of evaporates from your brain. Our brains really crave context. They need something to latch onto. So when you learn words in isolation without any connection to how they're actually used, it's like they're just floating out there in space.
They're just these abstract concepts.
Yeah.
One of the sources we looked at suggested reading a story and encountering new words naturally in that context.
Oh, that's a great strategy.
It's like if you learn a new word while cooking, you're smelling the ingredients, you're tasting it as you go, you're seeing how it all comes together.
Exactly. You're not just learning the word, you're experiencing it. You're getting a feel for how it's used in different situations, which helps you build a much richer, deeper understanding of the language.
It's about making those connections and seeing how the language actually works in the real world.
Okay, speaking of doing too much, our second mistake is trying to learn way too many words at once.
Oh yeah, the good old cram it all in approach.
Right. But is that really the best way to learn? I mean, I know I feel overwhelmed if I try to do too much at once. Our brains can only handle so much information at a time. It's like if you think of your brain as a sponge, you can only absorb so much water before it starts to drip out.
Right.
If you overload it, you're not really going to retain anything.
Exactly. One of the things that we kept seeing was this idea of spaced repetition. Have you heard of that before?
Oh, yeah,
Will
absolutely.
you explain what that is?
Yeah, so spaced repetition is essentially a learning technique where you space out your review sessions. So you're not just cramming everything in at once. You're revisiting the material just when you're about to forget it. And that actually helps to strengthen those memories and make them last much, much longer.
So it's like these little mini reminders for your brain.
Exactly. And a lot of people use flashcards for that.
Flashcards, apps, yeah.
Lots of different ways to do it.
It seems like a really simple but powerful technique. Okay, mistake number 3, and this one kind of surprised me. Relying solely on translations. I mean, if you don't know a word, you look it up, right?
Right. And it can be helpful,
Right.
like to get the gist of what a word means. But
What's wrong with that?
if you rely too heavily on translations, you end up kind of translating word for word in your head instead of really thinking in English.
So you're not really absorbing the language, you're just like converting it in your brain.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's not going to help you become fluent or sound natural when you speak.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And the source actually suggests focusing on English definitions instead of immediately jumping to your native language.
Yeah. Like immerse yourself in the English definition.
And maybe even creating mental images. That seems really helpful.
Visuals are so powerful.
Like if you see the word dog, don't think of the word for dog in your native language. Picture a dog, a furry 4-legged friend.
Exactly. That direct connection in your brain makes a huge difference. All right, moving on to mistake number 4. Brushing off pronunciation. It can be so easy to get caught up in grammar and vocabulary, the building blocks. But pronunciation is essential for actually using the language.
Because you could have the biggest vocabulary in the world, but if you can't pronounce anything,
It doesn't matter.
it's not going to be very helpful.
Not exactly.
One of the things we saw as a suggestion for this was using audio resources. Podcasts, obviously, that's a great one.
Yes.
Language learning apps. Things that allow you to really hear the language and kind of absorb those sounds. I know I catch myself repeating phrases when I'm listening to podcasts, and it's almost like my brain is trying to mimic the sounds.
That's exactly what you should be doing. Like our brains are wired to learn language through sound.
It's like learning a musical instrument. The more you practice, the more natural those sounds become.
Totally. All right, ready for our 5th and final mistake.
Hit me with it.
Ignoring collocations and word families.
Okay, explain those terms. Those sound a little intimidating.
I know they sound very technical, but they're actually quite simple. Collocations are basically words that frequently go together. So, for example, in English, we say make a decision. We don't say do a decision.
Right. Do a decision sounds very strange.
It sounds weird, right?
Yeah.
Even though grammatically it kind of makes sense. But it's
Yeah.
about learning those natural word pairings.
Those combinations that just sound right.
Exactly. Word families are groups of related words that share a common root. So, for example, decide, decision, indecisive. They all come from the same root word.
Oh, like a family tree but for words.
Yes. Learning these patterns can really help you expand your vocabulary more naturally.
So it's like cracking the code of the English language.
Exactly.
Wow, this entire deep dive has really shifted my perspective on learning new words. It's
Yeah.
not just about memorizing a definition. It's about making those connections, understanding the nuances, and really seeing how the language works together as a whole.
And it's a journey. It's not a race. You don't have to learn everything overnight. Find what works for you. Be patient with yourself and enjoy the process.
So, as we wrap up, here's a question to ponder. What one small change can you make to your vocabulary learning routine based on what we've talked about today? Keep that in mind as you continue your English learning journey. Until next time.